Good morning and happy Sunday. My name is Jamie Rich, and I am so glad that you've tuned in from wherever you are and whatever time it is to join us for our gathering that we have here on Sunday mornings, where we have a topic where everyone gets a chance to chime in. This week, we're looking at something that has kind of grown out of some of the discussions that we've had in previous weeks, and that is uh, a word emerged last week that is, you'll see it on your screen if you can see it. The idea of, we talk a lot about the life experiences that we've had, these external things that go on in our world. I'm experiencing this, I'm experiencing that. But part of what you are also allowed to experience in this world is your inner experiences. And so the word "inperience" kind of came like a coined phrase last time. And we wanted to talk a little bit today about what awaits you when you tune in to that sort of inner wisdom, the inner experience that you're going through. And we're inviting you today, if you want to join with us, you can join us in the room here at rsslive.org, or you can continue watching us on YouTube or on Facebook, and we'll be able to monitor the chat from there. But the great thing about what we do every Sunday is there's always an interesting assemblage of people who join us. And this week, I'm just especially proud that there's some new voices in the room. So let's get started with what's going on, and we'll dive into what's awaiting us in our experiences. So good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Sunday.
Good
Happy
morning.
Sunday. I love the geometry of how we get aligned sometimes, right? As I'm often want to do when we start talking about a subject, I'm going to turn to the person in the center of our circle to kind of anchor us, because were you here when we invented the word "inperiences"? Because I know all of a sudden we threw a word out to people, and it's like a discussion, like what the heck is this word? So can you get us back into a discussion mode so we can begin talking about this?
Yes, of course. Well, I know I had to look up the word because I was like, is that a word? Is "inperience" a word? For clarity, it is not a Webster dictionary word. However, when we're talking about imperience in this conversation, it's about your inner experience. What's going on in your inner being? I know last week and the weeks before we've talked about the infamous pause, to allow yourself to sit in your body somatically and go, what am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? Do I feel it in my fingertips? Are my fingers tingly? Or am I jittery? Like figuring out where you feel it in your body, and then being able to determine what feelings are coming up for you, to then figure out what's next. And as we talked about your environment, because you're in the energy of the environment, the energy of the people, what is your inner experience, and then how do you take that and what's going on around you and make that work for you in a sense.
Great. So you just introduced this whole idea of the translation that we kind of need to do between the external world, where we're kind of taking it in from the sort of known five senses, right? Remember, you've heard these popular things. Our friend Jaloki voiced some of this. Do you see it when you believe it, or do you believe it when you see it, right? Where does that translation take place with you? And so when we start talking about our inner experiences, I realize Sandra and Ali, neither of you were here last week, but the great thing about that is it's alive with you today. Ali, is there anything when you saw that we were inventing a word, did that somehow trigger something in you because you love language so much?
Thank you, Jamie. First, I would like to acknowledge the presence of our audience. You are also free to comment right now or later on the replay, because we love also the team replay. So I'm a warrior. I'm a warrior of words. I'm more and more careful about the words that I express and the words that I see. And I love so much inperience because it realized for me what I was thinking, and I was trying to go to Latin, like imperitus, imperiri, which means the things that we are going through. But instead of experience, like going to share outside, it's all around to connect with our inner part and to share inside. And maybe when we are gathering all our parts, we can externalize and experience with others. what I would like to say is also to realize the aha moments of if I have an experience, an experience, that means that you, Sang, Jamie, anyone on the room could have different experience. Same event, we are like 5 people in the room, we might have 5 different experiences. So it's to acknowledge that it's my own, and that means that I can add on your experience, on Sandra experience, on Jamie and Ray experience, on the audience experience that are different. So it's to the awareness that it is not my truth, it's my perception. Thank you.
Beautifully said. So, it's recognizing that part of what's happening, there's the external thing that we're all kind of sharing in our senses, what's happening in our world, what's going on. There's our interior process that we're looking at, and that somehow we need to be able to sort of translate that, right? So it's not part of the mental stuff. I see Ray nodding, but I also want Sandra, anytime you want to chime in, is there anything? I mean, I'm really curious. You landed into space this morning, and somebody throwing a brand new word at you. And are there any things that are on your mind this morning as you hear about this topic and what we're discussing?
It's very interesting because I love words as well. And the thing I love with symbols, which is what the letters and words really and truly are, is using the symbols in order to create the meaning of what's happening either in the moment or in the situation. And it may not be in anybody's dictionary, and yet there's meaning to those symbols. The same way as somebody came up with the word of interscape as opposed to landscape, or you have all these different configurations around the word scape. So in experience, it's a little interesting to say, but it's not an unfamiliar way to express the inner aspect of self. So I love the idea of really dissecting the words in order to not just to go back to some aspect of root in language linguistically, but to really feel what does that vibrate within me.
Right.
So when I heard the word, this new symbols put together of imperience, it's taken me a little minute to figure out what that vibration is.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's wrong, it's just that it's a new outer experience because it's coming to me from a different place. And so my inner experience is now going, I wonder, okay, maybe, I don't know yet. Let me just sit with this. But that's what the whole idea of having that inner process to begin to connect with your other systems, because you need to check out your other systems need to go, oh, whoa, what? Brain is like, I am not comprehending that. That does not compute.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's a good stretch.
I
think it's a good stretch for the inner aspect of ourselves and for the external aspects of ourselves.
Yeah, it's funny how language shifts can really help that because they peg it because, again, one of the things we talk about is that, oftentimes the biggest distance between 2 points is between your head and your heart, right? And when a new thought is introduced for you to look at the way in which you sort of navigate through your life, you do have a pause where, wait, what does this mean? I don't have a ready answer for this, right? I actually get to consciously choose how to bring, okay, what I'm experiencing right now here in this room is X, right? I know what the read is. I know what these people are. I know what all of this, but something shifted, something's different. I go through a process of self-verification. And that self-verification to be able to find out what the definition is. And Ray knows where I'm heading next, I think, which is, we often do this because we get caught up in, Sandra, you introduced a really interesting, like what's going on here. The question of, well, wait, let me take a look at something, right? Ray, for you, we've talked about this a lot of times where, it's not just the conditioning piece, but, the word, jumbo may mean something very different from me, and I act accordingly from the word jumbo. The word jumbo means something different to somebody else. And we have a collision sometimes because we're still driving from meanings that neither of us have self-verified.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that collision?
Yeah. What's interesting is uh, in a simple introduction of perception, understanding, and a response to a word, we're taking the tools that humans use, language. Um, I come from a communication background, and essentially the first thing we were introduced to is just because you say it doesn't mean anyone understands what you're talking about, which is a bit, which is contrary to the way language is used. They say, well, if you use certain words, everyone knows what you mean. It's quite the opposite. So now we've evolved into, I think, an age of co-sharing and co-developing meaning together. So if we take a word, we have to sort of say, well, what does it mean for Sang? What does it mean for Ollie? What does it mean for Sandra, et cetera, et cetera? And what's interesting, I ran across two people who are academics who were introducing new words to bring into new concepts that were based on old thinking. So Nora Bateson and Bayo Akamalafe started to use new words, and everybody says, what the hell is that? Like, I can't even pronounce it. Like, what's this thing called poesis? She was taking Greek words. But what was brilliant is the minute someone started to do as Sandra was doing and as Sang and Ollie, and you, Jamie, is basically giving us, that's what he means or she means or they mean or whoever is bringing in something, but that's not the way I sense it or perceive it. So then so it's a relational interaction. It's not static, it's dynamic. And that's the fun thing with these conversations, because what we do in previous weeks always resurfaces in some form or another, as well as what I like to do is to say conversations are incredibly valuable. We treat them like they're not, but they're also cumulative and iterative. They never really stop. So that's kind of what we're doing now. So back to you guys.
Well, no. This is really lovely. If you're just joining us right now, we're talking about what awaits you in your inperiences, which we realize is a new word that we just kind of tossed at you. But one of the things that's helpful about when you introduce new words is that they allow you to kind of look at things from a different perspective, right? And so what we're looking at, and if there are those of you who are maybe listening to this or want to share in the chat, the time in which you're sort of that, well, wait, there's this external thing happening, there's this internal thing that I'm used to, and there's this third thing that's sort of happening, which Sandra kind of allowed us to kind of take a look at. Well, what is alive right now in this sort of new moment that I'm looking at? And most people don't, they don't trust that translation process, right? Because I know saying, well, the way that we get conditioned out of this is you're wrong. I don't know. I don't care. Whatever you're just creating in your new experiences, I'm going to define that as wrong. Have you ever been wronged, Shane? Saying, has someone ever come up to you and say, well, about that awareness you're having, about that new discovery, let me just tell you right from the beginning, you're wrong.
Right. No. I know we've talked about this in the past. I love it when people do things like that to me specifically, because then I go, wow, that's fascinating. Tell me more. Right? Because if we go back to something that Sandra said, and really it's that place of curiosity, when someone says something or there's a new word that's introduced, we can either come from that place of curiosity to go, what does that mean? What is this? What surrounds this? What energy is around this word, etc.? Because as Sandra was sharing her story, I was thinking, like what I did last week, I was like, imperience, it's not even a word. And I was like, let me go look it up. And I'm looking it up and I'm like, it's not a Webster word. Okay, good. And so I went in that space to go, well, now what does this word mean? Whereas Sandra was like, let me sit with the energy of the word and sit with it. And so everyone had their own inner experience with the word itself, right? And then going back to words, I want to share something really quick. So as I was growing up, because recently I asked someone, why is Vietnamese language such a hard thing? And they're like, it's not really that hard. And I go, but it is. Then they explained their process of learning English, and I said, never mind, right? Because like Sandra was saying, we've created these other words that add to something. And I remember I get really particular about words, and I'll ask people for clarity, because as I was growing up, my dad didn't speak very good. My dad didn't speak fair English. So being a child growing up with a dad who didn't really understand or speak the language well, I like to ask, because when I was younger, I wasn't able to ask, what did you say? Because I was supposed to know what he said. So as I got older, I started asking, what does that mean? What did you say, for clarity? Because sometimes we hear things, it's like the game of telephone, right? We hear it, and then what gets said is something else. So
Well, once again, you created a really interesting landscape for us to kind of continue this conversation on, and that is the way in which, curiosity about, well, what did you mean? What does that word mean? What are you doing? My for the two French speakers in this room, my college French instructor was from Vietnam. And he said, he's teaching his fifth language through his second language, right? But he said, you people in English think that you have it's so easy. He would write the word ma on the chalkboard, and he said, in Vietnamese, this sound can be said 5 different ways with 5 different types of meanings, right? And so one of the things that non-native speakers bring to the situation, having been married to someone who was a non-native speaker in the United States, right? We forget that that's the whole idea. I'm not really quite sure. Tom's frustration when he first came where he couldn't nuance English the same way in which he could nuance Spanish, and he had to learn what things meant, right? And so our language and the language we use is often an expression of our inner experience of things. Well, that's really comforting to me. Really? Why would you use the word comforting in this context? And we find out so much about it. What's alive for someone right now? I've been babbling. Yeah, Ollie.
First, how much I appreciate this conversation. Thank you, Sang, Sandra. I came to many thoughts, but I'm going to be short and sweet as always. First, the dictionary is always behind, because the dictionary is adding words that are existing already, that are trendy, used. So in any way, the locality and the real conversation will always outperform the dictionary. Then I was thinking also there is a tribe that has probably dozens and dozens of different words to describe any variation of the color of green. And in the Eskimo, the North Pole, there are probably dozens of words describing the condition of the snow. So it's all about locality. How do we express the nuances of language, of words? And then I came into this incredible metaphor that is really dear to my heart. I love to, when my brain is boring, that each of us, at some point, we arrive in this world as a cup of tea with clear water. And then day after day, month, year after year, there is some infusion of tea bags, of different tea bags that come into our tea. And that makes our water unique against each other's. But originally, we arrived all with a cup of tea with clear water. But it's also invariant to how much time do we allow ourselves to look at our inner cup of tea, and also to compare to others' cup of tea. Like Sang, could be mimosa, Jamie, it could be lavender, Sandra, it could be chocolate, whatsoever. But we are all different flavors in our inner cup of tea. And it's to realize that no one is right or wrong. It is what it is. And it's to realize that it is our narrative, and there are others' narrative. nothing wrong or right. It's all about how do we take a pause, a moment to look within and to look outside the different cup of tea that are always different.
And what you did so beautifully, Ali, is you actually kind of came up with the definition of what inperiences really is. It's that internal dictionary that is self-verified in the moment, and it can sometimes be then checked against my experiences and redefined, right? I can hold on to a really a strong definition because it means something to me on the inside, because it's sort of the way in which I've lived. But that part of it is the inperiences are alive to us in the present moment, right? I see you nodding, Sandra. Does that what Ollie said or what anything else some other people have said kick off anything for you?
Yeah, I think okay. I'll go to the word conditioning. And conditioning has always been about how to help the community stay in one lane as much as possible. Any outliers, anything that's outside of that or on the fringe of that, we typically don't know what to do with it. And so the same thing is true with language. We hear language, whatever the languages we are hearing, we hear it from a place of being conditioned to hearing those words used in that way, in that phrase, and we call it a sentence. So we call it a whatever we call it. When we step outside of that, then people get all ruffled and they're just like, what the heck? You don't make sense, which in fact is not true. And I'm speaking from my own personal experience as well as experience. I am full-time caregiver to my oldest brother, full-time caregiver to my oldest brother, who's had 3 strokes and many different other things happening. And so he has what's called aphasia. When he's got it up here in his head, when he tries to bring it out, it's all like an alphabet soup. So my job is to sort the soup, is to figure it out, is to try to go inside his experience and also his experience to make sense out of whatever it is that he's trying to say. We are not conditioned in that way.
That's right.
We're conditioned to only accept what is presented in front of us. And if he were out on the street and having his in his own world and words, I promise you, somebody would think he was quote unquote crazy, which I don't think people are crazy, but that's the terminology that would be used, which is so not the truth. And so when I take a step back and first recognize I am a conditioned human for a certain reason, and I've been operating in that, it's good. And I also know how to operate outside of that, good, in the effort to, as Ali put in the chat, to infuse it all, to bring it all back to not only make sense to me, to maybe help others make sense of, which personally I don't really care whether they do or not, but that's the idea, is to help be in community with each other, to commune in unity with each other. And that is not always an easy thing to do, to be in, because I'm already conditioned. So I'm working myself out of the conditioning in order to bring in something new that nobody else is experiencing or experiencing.
Right. But you
at all.
But you gave us the permission slip. You really, in that last, I don't know if anybody else caught the magical phrase that emerged from that, but I think sorting the soup is like the phrase of the day, because a lot of people are going to get stuck in, well, I didn't order soup. What is this? And they're going to fight what is not part of their experience, right? But when we accept the responsibility that sometimes in our reaction, or excuse me, in our interactions with other people, we're really sorting the soup, right? And if we don't look to that, and we're going to go into our conditioning and just write it all off as, well, this is a mess. This is a jumbled mess. I don't understand any of this. We're missing what that soup, what that sorting experience could bring out. And we want to wall up. This is not part of my frame of experience. I don't know what this is. I'm uncomfortable. I'll use the term freaking out. People freaking out just because we do it ourselves, right? We get dysregulated by all of it. But what would it be like if we recognized that part of it was sorting the soup, right? Ray, that kind of resonated with you, didn't it? Did you catch that phrase that wonderful phrase she said?
Yeah, I definitely had to respond to that because I had not the complex situation you're faced with dealing with deciphering the words from somebody who's who's suffering from stroke, which is incredibly complex. But there again, I think it's an emotional thing where you sense a direction or a feel to what's being communicated. There's two minor examples that I thought were somewhat humorous. I was watching movies, as I typically do. There's a great variety of global movies now in all languages, but not all the systems handle the translation effectively. I'll give two examples. The one thing that I think is totally underestimated is the sophistication of the film industries on a global level, way beyond, I hate to say it, Hollywood. One of the films I was watching, and two short examples. The film that I was watching on the network was a French detective series. So my wife doesn't understand French as well as I do, so left the subtitles on. And I burst out laughing at one point, and she said, "What are you laughing about?" I said, "That's not what he said." And and he said he really meant to be incredibly more rude than what's being said in the word. The subtlety, and it brought back a memory of me learning in school. Is I was taught in French, and we had a Haitian teacher, we had somebody from France teaching us, and the first thing that history, every topic in French, and then we had to translate through the use of books. And the first thing I remember to this day, one of the things the teacher said, "You have to remember that English is an imprecise language compared to all the other languages of the world, because they have multiple terms and multiple tonalities that give meaning to what's being communicated, as opposed to the English sort of generic." So back to the soup. The other example, just to end briefly, was Russian movies. Like, the system doesn't know how to translate Russian. Neither do I. So I'm watching a Russian World War II series, and it's live AI translation. Talk about messed up soup. It wasn't in sentence form, and it had 5 words that didn't look like they belonged in the message. But by looking, which is I find fascinating, looking at the characters, their body language, and their tone, I picked out the 2 words that were the most likely thing. And I said, "Well, I know what's going on. They're not happy." And one guy's refusing to do what the other guy is ordering him to do. So so to build the capacity that we're talking about, that Sandra has shared with us, is to learn how to seek meaning, sense meaning, and to figure out things. Is try watching a movie in a different language, look at the words, and see if it still makes sense, and watch for the body language and the feelings that you're getting.
That's great. Again, I'm reminding you, if you're just now joining us and watching us wherever you are, we're talking about We're talking about soup today, and how you can make soup and how you can enjoy it. And we welcome you into the soup of this conversation because we're talking about what our experiences, those responses that we have to what's happening through all of the senses that we take in and what we're experiencing, and the meaning that we want to bring to it. And we're just really, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm just having the best time. Learning and listening. Saying we haven't heard from you in a while. I feel a deficit.
Oh, it's okay. I love this conversation because I love words. So because I really had to think about why I loved words. And it did go back to one part of discipline for me when I was growing up was writing the dictionary as well. So having to learn that and then pick things out of the written encyclopedia that our family got, because that education was punishment for me. And so but I became inquisitive about words because it was the only way to express, and that's how I became a writer, so to speak, because it was the only way to do things, because kids back in the day were seen and not heard. Right? Stay in a child's place, do all these things, not to mention that I was very isolated. So having come into the world as an 18-year-old who hadn't experienced the world at all the way I felt like everybody else had, I was at a disadvantage for learning how to communicate with others effectively. And so all of that I just kind of held on to, and I never learned the inner part until about probably 10, 12 years ago when I started doing some specific work. And then I started really paying attention to where it sits in my body
Mhm.
from the emotional standpoint. And I know we've talked about this before, the importance of that pause is because a lot of times we want to get mad or angry and whatever, sad, happy. Those are like the top. There's five. Loneliness is another one. There's that we just kind of hold on to first, instead of trying to kind of doing what Sandra talked about, is like sitting with it and just really figuring out, what is this experience for me? What experience do you want to have? That's the other piece to this. People will talk to me and say, well, what do you want to do? I was like, well, here's the experience I want to have. How do we do that? That's something different than saying, I want to go skating. But you say, I want to go skating by the water and I want to feel the wind, things like that. So now you're giving someone some more details of an experience, just like we would on the outside. So when we think about our inner experience, it's what's going on in there. How do I want to feel versus how am I feeling at this moment?
Yeah, I'll get to you in just a second, Ollie. Let me build a little bit on what Sang had
Sure.
said, if I could, and that is, what you're allowing us to take a look at is we are having our own internal experience, but something you just alluded to, which is oftentimes we get into this whole confirmation bias, right? Where we're only running the filter through what matches our definition of things, right? And again, what Sandra's invitation to the soup means is that we have to, in life, and we're in relationships, we do want to be able to take a minute and look at how what other people's internal value, what their internal dictionary matches with us. We do want to be able to have an opportunity to do that dance, right? And so we can get really firm, understand ourselves. This is really great. We can go to the internet. We can find out. We can build our case for how wonderful our truth is, and I verified this on the internet. This must be the way in which the whole entire world sees it. And then you run into Ray Guillot, who wait, you didn't see all the stuff on the internet that confirmed what confirmed my experience. What's wrong with you? So, Ollie, I hate to throw that landscape, but that's really, I wanted to draw out this whole idea that the magic of our internal dictionary is something that you also want to be curious about what someone else's internal dictionary is, right? So did my thought impede what you wanted to share, Ollie?
Yes, of course. I have a soup of ideas. It's a superb session. I would like to thank you first for this awareness of conversation that my thoughts, I'm boiling our thoughts. I was asking myself first the question: do we have at any given moment the cognitive capacity to go to take a pause? Because in your title, what awaits, that means that the body, our inner self, waits us to connect with our body to deliver a message. How much time do we have, but how much time do we plan on our weeks to take a moment of pause to reflect? Then I was realizing, talking about movies, I was listening to watching a great movie, and I'm not going to describe, but at the end, it was a story, and at the end of the story, there was a community of Asians, and they were talking to their inner language, to their modern language, in an English movie, and then it was a subtitle translate. And I felt really blessed because we are really connecting with native language. But then I came into this phase, and I'm going to be short and sweet, but I realized that if our experiences, we can try to pose words, because experiences mean that we express to others, but within, we don't have any word. Trying to translate anything that we live into words is losing translation by any means, because it's like there is this level of our experiences, and we are trying to describe words to go out, because else the bodies keep the score and blah blah blah, but we need to express, but then we are losing translation.
Yeah.
But then it means also that when we are hearing someone else experience, we have to just first taking some time to receive, and not to erase, because at some point we try to understand, and by understanding, we are putting our tea bag in their cup, and we are erasing their own experience.
Right.
So I'm really aiming for that, for taking time also to let them express and not erase their experience.
Right. Thank you. Very, very good point. Because what you're speaking to is that you lose the complexity of a soup when you homogenize it. I don't know, does that word translate into a background for you? Do you know the term that we use in the States, to homogenize? In other words, to blend it into something that is so. What you're inviting us to remember is that someone else's perspective, someone else's jewels, someone else, they're valid on their own. We don't need to homogenize someone else um, for us to be able to have a conversation. You're allowed to have your definitions, your interpretations, but it doesn't require us to become homogenized. So what I've been awaiting, Sandra, since you introduced all this, and it's your first time gathering with us. What else is kind of emerging that I'm awaiting to hear from you? What anything else that has arisen from your perspective up in the corner?
Oh, I hear you say you are waiting to hear from me. I have to that's interesting. I don't know if anyone has been awaiting to hear anything from me. So, no, the conversation is such it's such deep and rich, and my desire as I do the work that I do, is to help people actually meet themselves, exactly what we're talking about. That's the starting point. The starting point is not outside of us. The starting point is in us. We are the actual starting point to anything, to everything. And so to just continue continue to be a reminder that the chaos that we see outside of us, it's the chaos that's already happening inside of us in one way or another. And when we meet that chaos, when it comes to us, when we see it in the external, we may not have struck the match to light the fire, but because the fire is happening in front of us, there is a connection. And to really take a look to see, so how am I connected to this outer experience? what needs to shift or change, or maybe nothing needs to shift and change. Maybe it really isn't mine at all. Maybe I'm conditioned into accepting it because I'm conditioned that that ought to be mine, when in fact it's really not. So to begin to really discern the difference between what is mine, truly mine, and then how will I choose to respond from that place, as opposed to react to the conditioning.
Yes, and what you did was, again, we call them Rise and Shine Sundays master classes. Like what you just talked about in that short little journey of what you were talking about is something you could spend an entire weekend workshop teaching other people how to trust that inner voice, that in experience, to be able to just, simply walk. And I love hearing these ideas that come out, because I think it's really important in these days that we model we model who we want to be in the world, right? And that we recognize that a lot of people are operating from that deep level of conditioning. Because if in the world, again, if you step out of line, right? We need to kind of control you and get you back into line, and accept the common definition of things, the common way of doing things. The community is already predetermined. Well, yeah, that's a nice idea, but we don't have time for that right now. Or what often happens is when people are sharing their unique contribution in the world, it has been my experience. Again, I don't know if it's anybody else's, that some people view diversity as dissonance, and complexity as something that should be avoided at all costs, right? That the mere fact that one thing can come out and express 8 different ways, there's obviously something wrong. No, if it comes out 8 different ways, what a wonderful faceted jewel that this experience is, right? So I know I mentioned the C word, which is control. It's come out a couple of times. And I don't want to get too esoteric in this conversation, even though we dwell in it all the time. But I think for people watching this conversation, it's really a wonderful way, because all of us have different perspectives. Ollie's perspective is different than mine. Seng's is different from mine, Ray, but the value comes in recognizing that's what makes a good soup, right? And if that's what you're looking for in the world, if you're looking for bland, everybody knows what's predictable, whatever, but there is just such richness in the idea of the complexity of the blend. And if you're deeply conditioned to think that everything has to be the same, right? It's going to be very challenging for you. And that was if you will, Sandra, the master class I was talking about, which is teaching people to sort of, get back to that self-verification, recognizing that the external ways of which, they may not be for you, that may be some kind of predetermined solution. Anyone, does this speak to anyone? I mean, it's a free ball. Whoever wants to catch this moment, go with it. What else is alive? Yeah, Ollie, go ahead.
No, I was not hearing Sang. That's why I was placing that.
Oh.
Oh yeah, that's because I put mute on there and I always forget and just start talking. And now I forgot what I was gonna say. So whatever emerged went right back down.
Let's just take it. We'll take that pause. We'll do a breath here.
Yeah, I'll get Sang charged up here. Is the based on the many conversations we've had in the last few months, is what's really interesting here, and Sandra brought it up again, is conditioning and standardization. Is the certain societies or groups want a standard that everyone must follow, but the world and our lives are based on complexity. But we haven't learned how to live with complexity and in complexity. Because if your mindset or your conditioning is about there's only one choice, one standard, you exclude everything else. So we're not good at looking at the soup and living with the soup or in the soup or developing the capacity. So, and I think Sang is mentioned many times, is the her journey and her experiences has been about the developing that capacity to live with complexity.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Ray, for that. Which goes back to thank you for reminding me of and piggybacking off of what Sandra said about the conditioning and the learning. Because when I was asking someone last week about the Vietnamese language, and then I talked about the English language, there was also the aspect of cultural definitions, right? Right. And so, because I have a colleague right now who's over in Spain, and so they were talking specifically about, they were trying to explain to someone in a different country why the N word is not appropriate for everyone to use. Okay. And I'm no expert, nor do I say anything about it, but that individual who lives in Spain doesn't understand what it means here, or what the meaning of it is in the culture. And so having to explain it and understand it is very fascinating, but because there was a lot of emotions that came up in the conversation when I'm this far away, because the person who is stating it was a Black individual, to try to explain it, but it was like the emotions of, like, because this other person could not comprehend, right? And it's based off of their experience, it's based off of this individual's experience, but this other person's like, well, I don't understand it, but why does everybody get to say it and nobody else does? Right? So, like, where do I get the permission slip, if there is one? But just understanding that too, because sometimes when we travel to other countries, what we may find offensive is not offensive in other countries, etc. And I think we don't think about that even in our daily lives when interacting with people in America, because we think everybody in America should be the same. Kind of like earlier, Ray and Jamie and I were talking about marriage, because I've been doing a little bit of research about marriage, and so even that, the cultural pressures, like, my kids are in their mid to late 20s, and how many times people go, well, how many grandkids do you have? And I go, 0. I have grand pets. And so, like, there's this cultural and societal expectation that you should do it this way, or you should know this by now because you are a certain age, when you may not have even had that experience yet.
Yeah, you're talking about that collision between language and culture and meaning and community, and that's a really, again, it's an interesting territory to navigate,
Mhm.
because it requires you to be open to the fact. I'm old enough to remember when triggering, when the whole concept of triggering, that was like, I remember the very first time when we were doing a live event, somebody said, well, we want to make sure that this can be very triggering for people. Do we want to have a social worker who might be here? Because there's maybe some people who have, um, something to want to talk about after this particular movie has been shown, or part of that discussion. Or do we need to remind people that there are things that are triggering in here? And what I so appreciated about this is that sometimes people are just so checked out, right? Because they've been conditioned to not question that, not ask, and what I really want to make sure that we always allow here, by not using the sage on the stage, there's no expert in this room. There's no voice louder, right? And that willingness to let voices be heard and recognize, oh, I have a responsibility in my word choices, in my meaning, that I may run into something, right? That may not jive well with people that I know about. but I want to be in that situation to do exactly what you reminded us at the very beginning of this saying, which is when I hear this, what did I do? I don't understand, because we've all been in situations where we're instantly ostracized from the group, chided, made fun of, decried, and we get into battles because now we've lost that cohesion, right? So to bring this back, that's one of the reasons maybe why people don't speak a lot to their inperiences, right? Because they just don't have the right context to share them. Does that, because you work with a lot of people, Sandra. I know you as a coach, right?
And you're right, Jamie. It because of how we are conditioned to receive, we are not conditioned to take a pause and do that inner verification. Is this right for me? Does this mean the same thing to me? It may mean a lot of things culturally. It may mean a lot of things in community, but does this mean this to me? And I'm going to piggyback on something you said, saying in relationship to the N-word, because I had an experience when I lived in Costa Rica, lived there for 8.5 years. And I also make my own body butters and fragrance them myself. And one of the fragrances that I truly love, and it works very well in the masculine with men, is patchouli. Now, patchouli is an oil scent. And I say the word patchouli, that's how I've learned it in English. It probably sounds something different in a different language, right? One of my Costa Rican friends said, when I shared with her what I was doing, she said, "You can't say that word." And I'm like, "What? I don't. She said, "That's a bad word." I was like, "What?" And so my inner self went, "What in the world? What is this really all about?" And in that culture and in that language, the word, as I was pronouncing it, was a bad word. It meant something derogative. Let me say it that way. I won't say it was quote unquote bad, but it was derogative.
Okay.
And so she just kept saying, "Well, you just have to be careful when you say that word." And I was like, "Well, how else do I say it? What?" And I didn't even ask what was the meaning, because I could see, as we've talked about, sensing through the body and expressions through body movement and motion. I could see on her face and in her body went from being kind of out and open to back, and kind of like, no, that's not, don't do that. I never made a body butter product with that word because of that in that area, in that country. Now here in the US, everybody knows what that means in accordance to, our language of understanding. And yet I still don't make it, because I now have a different context.
Sure.
To what that word could mean someplace else.
Right.
So it's hard. It's so hard because it is complex. And yet, when we're willing to take that pause, as I did with that one word, and not allow my emotions to go, "You got to be kidding me. This doesn't make sense. I'm just going to use it. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to be out there, blah, blah, blah." But take into account that there is a different level of sensitivity around these symbols that I have put together to express. And had I not had that other wisdom within me to come out, I could have overridden. And that's the triggering aspect. You just override it. You don't even, it's like you don't even care. And when you're emotional about something, passionately emotional about something, a word or food or anything or situation or what have you, your brain does not know what to do.
Mhm.
And it's only when I take a moment to assess all of this energetically, inner and outer,
Mhm.
can I step back and say, you know what? Maybe I need to approach this differently.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that. Ollie has something he wants to add in on that. That's just really lovely.
Wow, I really feel blessed to hear that from you, Chandra. What you experience with the word, I experience with my avatar. Not going to the details because it doesn't make sense, but I was receiving a watermelon and I was posting an avatar with a watermelon because to transfer the joy that I had to receive a piece of watermelon. And then I got calls received at some point with the Black community, and then I realized that this could harm, could impact. So I think the question I'm always asking to myself, to you, and to you, the audience: how open are we to explore that there is not one narrative? There are many other narratives. Like the best metaphor is the tomato. We all think that the tomato is always red, but there are hundreds of different kinds of tomatoes. Same for the apple. But we are all this kind of image of what is an apple, what is a pear, what is a tomato. But in fact, there are varieties, and it's to take the time and to be open. And so it's really to realize how much time do we plan, because if we don't plan, it's later, and later is never. And it's also before I yield the mic, it's really dear to my heart to realize that of course it's my brain, it's my experience. The most important is relationship, not to be right, but to be in relationship. So it's also for me to make the effort to be open that there are other experiences out there of mine. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's again a wonderful weave as we kind of wrap up our time on the Breakthrough Show Network for this Sunday morning. What you all have invited us to consider in this journey when we're looking to see what awaits us in our experiences is this reminder that uh, we want to make sure that we create that same atmosphere for us to share what's really going on inside of us in terms of what our value set is, what and recognizing that we could be wrong, we could be, it's okay to make a mistake, it's okay to learn that patchouli is just something that, in a Costa Rican culture is not perhaps the best way that you want to proceed, but it doesn't damage your intent because you stay open to recognizing, again, this whole idea that our experiences are this internal dictionary of all these definitions that we've sort of accumulated over the years. And that the reason why it's a living dictionary is because we have the courage to be able to say, oh, wait, there's a different meaning. Maybe there's a different approach. Maybe there's a different way. But the bridge that we haven't yet built with this, and we're going to be getting to this because it's going to pivot nicely with something that we're envisioning, is that we also want to do what Sang always kind of reminds us to do often, which is to create that opportunity for others to experience what it's like to share what's on their mind without their judgment, without, and well, no, let me point out to you where you're wrong, right? Well, what does that really mean to you, right? Instead of recognizing that we have these internal processes that are different, the curiosity is, well, what does this mean to you? Let's talk about that. That's where that discovery happens. And that's where that modeling happens. And so in the next couple of weeks, and in specifically between this Sunday, next Sunday, and the 26th of July, we're going to be taking an opportunity to allow people to experience what it's like to have these type of conversations that where there is no expert in the room, but where I'm biased, but I so love that none of us had an idea of what the collective wisdom would be that would spring out, but it comes from valuing the input of the people who are in the room and recognizing that their lived experience is what informs the conversation to give it that richness and the depth. Not what I'm saying, it may come from something I said, but it's the soup. It's not the eggplant by itself, right? It is the collective stew. And you may have really liked the eggplant, you may have really liked the corn, you may have really liked, I don't know, the okra that was in the soup this morning, But that's the idea, is that we want to be able to model that blend. So at the end of this month, mark your calendars. You'll be able to learn more about it. We're going to be doing a 7-day summer experience of this, of a shift of setting up every day conversations like this. And if you're, oh my goodness, I keep forgetting we're over the hour, but we don't have to worry about it right now. But we'll be doing that here in a space that we've created, but we'll be talking more about it next week. And it'll culminate in a conversation on the 26th of July in this particular space on Sunday morning that's entitled Flipping How We Gather. What if we set as a goal for ourselves to, instead of talking at people, really had the ability to talk with people? So I am so appreciative of all of you for talking with all of us this morning. Was there anything else anyone else wanted to round out before we close today? A big heart from Ollie.
My brain
Yes.
is happy.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead,
My
Sandra.
brain is happy. No, my brain is happy. It's very, very happy. My brain is very, very happy. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My heart is very happy, and the last message I will say is giving ourselves grace. No matter what happens, our voice is welcome. We are incredible human beings living in the world that is boiling right now, but we are amazing. And as long as we are breathing, there is work to do. And at the same time, rest is a necessity sometimes. So giving ourselves grace.
Little pause. Well, again, thank you all for joining us this morning. Thank you for listening. We will be back here next week at 10 a.m. Central, and in whatever time zone that is for you. You can watch us at any time. We're grateful for the Breakthrough Show Network. And if you are listening or watching and want to join us, we'll be having a little informal gathering right here at rsslive.org following this gathering. So thank you for being here. And until next week, just wake up to what's emerging. We'll see you then.